Hi there. In this video, I'm going to run you through my 7 tips for success in video sales interviews. Video interviews are becoming more and more the norm, and so in this video, you're going to learn how to make sure that you ace your video job interview and get through to the next stage. Most people don't realize that job interviews are a bit like a reality TV show. You've just got to do enough to get through to the next stage. So, tip 1. Like any retailer knows, your shop window invites customers in to your store. So your shop window is what your potential employer is going to see when they look at you. So make sure that firstly you clean up the workspace, make sure you've got nothing on your desk, and remove any of the clutter that could distract your potential employer when they're on their video with you, but secondly it might distract you as well. Secondly, lighting and background. So think about the lighting you've got, make sure there's light on your face, and also have a think about what's behind you. It's fine to have pictures and what have you up on the walls, but just try and think about, is it distracting for them to be thinking, what's that picture? What have they got up on the wall? Thirdly, camera position. You might want to practice this a few times. You'll be amazed when you replay back your video where you're looking and where the camera is. So think about where the camera position is. That means that you're looking at the person you're talking to. And finally, in terms of preparation, what you should be wearing. You might do video conference calls currently where you've got your hoodie on or a t-shirt on, but in an interview, think about it as if it was a face-to-face. Think about what you're going to wear. If you're not sure, ask your recruiter. If you're not using a recruiter, sort of best policy is always, formal. You can always tone it down at a later stage. Tip 2 is to make sure that you rehearse. So, like any actor that's going on stage, you need to practice and review what you're doing. So you might want to practice and review just talking to someone and record it. Maybe ask someone for a second opinion, perhaps do a video call with your recruiter that's putting you forward if you've got one, and maybe ask them for any advice or tips that they can see in terms of how you're coming across. The other thing you might want to do when you're rehearsing is to look at trying to eliminate any bad habits. And what I'm talking about here is any sort of things that you might say, any slang that trips into what you're talking about. Perhaps you have a habit of looking away when you should be talking and focusing on the camera. So the more you rehearse, the more natural it becomes. And finally, eye contact. You'd be surprised how many times people are actually engaging with their audience, but they're not looking at the camera. So just practice and rehearse getting that eye contact and not being distracted by anything else. Tip 3, interview preparation. You can never have enough preparation. So key things to have a think about before you do the video are to firstly research the company. You don't need to be an expert, but you should be able to give a layman's term explanation of what the company does, perhaps the problem that they solve. Secondly, research the interviewer. Look at their background, look at their experience. Are they connected to anyone that you know on LinkedIn or Zing or any other sort of business social media site? Are they talking about anything? Have they posted anything recently? You may want to have a look about things like, do they support any football teams? Is there any sort of sports or hobbies that they enjoy on their profile? If you're using a recruiter, speak to them, ask them. They've taken the brief from the client. They've probably got all of the information about what the client is looking for. Highly likely they've worked with this company before, and they probably know about questions and some of the interview questions that are going to get asked. So, pump your recruiter for all the information. Have you got an icebreaker? Now, that's not a ship that sails through Arctic waters. I'm talking about a statement or a question you can use at the start of the meeting that might be relevant to the person or the company that creates a connection. It could be something that's topical. It could be something to do with what's happening in the media. It could be something to do with legislation changes, new products, whatever. You'll probably find there's a PR site on their website. Have a look, find out what's going on. The other things to be sure of when you're preparing are making sure that you've got your sales figures to hand and that you can talk through any war stories of greatest achievements or things that didn't go right and what you've learned from them. You'd be surprised how many times people get asked about their sales figures and they're struggling to give any factual information. A big no-no for any interview for a sales role. And finally, preparing why you. What is it that you've got, your experience, your background, your knowledge, that makes you a good fit for this particular role? Tip 4, try and remove any distractions on the day that may impact on your performance. So I always advise people, if you're doing a video interview or a telephone interview for that matter, in the house you're in, if you're not on your own, if you've got family, friends, flatmates, let everyone know that you've got the interview. Maybe have a do not disturb sign on the door, or just agree with everybody that when you're in that room and you've closed the door, unless there's a fire, don't disturb me. Also make sure that you've unplugged or you've silenced any phones that might be in the room that might ring. And also think about any notifications or apps you've got running that might ping or send noises and what have you. Once again, try and reduce any of these distractions. And finally, it's a simple one, but so many people miss it. Make sure all your batteries are charged up. So if you're using a headset, if you're using your phone, make sure it's charged up. Make sure it's not going to start failing on you and putting you in a position of being distracted. Tip 5, be engaging. Now, I appreciate it seems like a silly thing to say, but have a think about how you're going to create an impression with the person that you're interviewing that sets you apart from others who might be a little bit bland. So things to think of: you've got an icebreaker, so use it. Try and use it early on to get the person talking. If you can get them engaging with you early on, you get a feel for their style, their personality, enables you to adjust and be ready for the types of questions you think they're going to ask you. Also, you should, at the start of the video interview or any interview, if they don't already talk through it, confirm what the time frames are and what the structure is. What is the interviewer wanting to get out of this interview today, so that you can also start thinking about where you're going to go with this. And thirdly, and importantly, be conscious of making eye contact. You might find that when you're making eye contact by looking at the camera, you're not necessarily looking at things that are around you. So have a think about how you're going to actively listen when you're not necessarily looking directly at them. You might find actually looking at the camera and listening, you might take on more information than you would normally. Tip 6, once again, fairly obvious stuff, but ask interactive questions. So what do I mean by this? Well, get them giving you a two-way conversation rather than asking questions that are yes, no type answers. So some basic ones to ask might be, what does good look like in this role? Get some talking about the skills and experiences and the outcomes that the role has. Secondly, maybe some questions about the team. What's the structure of the team? Who else is in the team? What backgrounds do they come from? And third question that you could ask on a video interview would be maybe a little bit more about the company culture and where does this role go in the business? What do they see the future of this role being? Will mark you out as someone who's thinking long term rather than short term. And finally, tip 7, be ready to close and review. So if you don't already have a close, I've got another video on closing interviews that you can look at, but it's really important that at the end of this video interview that you bring the meeting to a close and you have some agreements of next steps. Where do we go from here? And checking to make sure that the interviewer is happy that you've covered everything that you're wanting to go through. Second thing you might want to think about after the video interview is a follow-up message. You can always ring up and get the person's email address, maybe drop them an email thanking them for their time and reiterating your interest in the role. You'd be amazed at how much that sets you aside from others. And finally, in terms of reviewing any video interviews, if you've got the capacity to actually record the interview, by all means do that. Review it back. Look at how you've gone. Did you answer the question? Were you listening? What was your eye contact like? Video interviews are becoming more and more prevalent, so the better you are at them, the more likely is you're going to get through to the next stage. I hope this video has helped, and I wish you every success in your upcoming or future video interviews. If you'd like any more information and any more resources on things such as writing a CV, making job applications, and interview technique and questions to ask, etc., feel free, go to my YouTube channel, or you can search for me, Charles Noyce, on YouTube. Best wishes.